War. What is it good for? Monsters. Say it again. War. What is it good for? The Wolfman. Jason Voorhees. Frankenstein. I don't advocate real-life violence, but it's hard to deny the correlations between war and horror movies. Gavrilo Princip isn't a name many know, but I know him as the man who inadvertently sparked horror in cinema. On the morning of June 28, 1914, Princip woke up with one thing on his mind, and that was to kill the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria. For those of you unfamiliar with the story, Princip had tried to assassinate him early in the morning but failed. So a disappointed Princip decided if he couldn't pull that off, at least he could pull off lunch. So he heads to his favorite sandwich shop to get the usual. He orders his food and looks for a seat, but out of the corner of his eye he sees something out of the storefront window. He sees a fancy car, but who's in it? Holy shit, can that be? It was him. It was Franz Ferdinand and his wife. He had the perfect viewpoint. So he pulls out his pistol and boom, candy and popcorn. Okay, maybe it didn't happen that fast, but on this episode titled Bullets to Popcorn, I'm going to take a deeper look and see how World War I remains the pushing force for the start of scary movies and how all wars that followed were just gas on the fire. This is the Sloppy Horror Podcast, and I'm your host, Christian Ramey, and I want to thank you guys for joining me. This is a big episode that I've really wanted to talk about ever since I even had the idea for this show. So, once again, big thank you for joining me. So let's kind of pick up right there where we left off. Now, he killed the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and for any of my history buffs and history majors out there, they know that that sparked what we know as World War I, the Great War. And the crazy part about World War I is it kind of falls in the shadows of our history books. You know, it kind of gets overplayed by World War II, which is a very heroic war too. But World War I is one of the craziest things that ever happened to this planet. And honestly, one of the most scariest things that I could ever imagine being a part of. And I'm just so thankful that our generation didn't have to go through this. But that being said, I don't advocate war. I don't like war. But what the results of it and what it's done to society, it's given us scary movies. And on this episode, we're really just going to break that down, and I want to show you kind of the domino effect of what happened with one gunshot and what it all led to. So obviously, he killed the Archduke. That started World War I. And when World War I's going on, you got to put yourself in 1914. So you got all these you have weapons that are brand new. I mean, the Industrial Revolution just kind of finishing up, and all these machines and weaponry, airplanes, all this shit's new. Nobody's used it before in like a large scale. Everybody's just been kind of waiting on it. You know, nobody was fighting a large war for a while, like a world war. So you have all this machinery that people haven't used. You have airplanes that people, were just years old, just barely made. Could you imagine? There's people in 2019 that are afraid to get on a plane. Could you imagine seeing one for the first time ever as it's dropping chemical gases on you and your friends? I couldn't fucking imagine. That'd be terrifying. So put yourself in perspective of this war. It was only 100 years ago, so that's not that hard to really imagine. just a couple people ago. So all these new things are going on, and the weird part is people wanted to fight. People forget that mentality too, where countries kind of wanted to prove themselves back then, and they wanted to fight. So this perfect storm of, the Archduke was assassinated, this country's going to attack this country, but this country wants to help this country. Well, this country's helping that country, and boom. It was a world war, and everybody wanted to flex because there were new divisions in the world, and people were trying to, display their dominance as a country. So people wanted to step out, and they wanted to step out swinging. And they fucking soonly realized that it was bad. It was horrible. I mean, it was literally hell on earth. So, put yourself in perspective of a person in 1914 going to war, seeing these things, and what it would do to your psyche, what you would be like when you got back home. Now, I say think like that because we're talking about scary movies on this show. This isn't a history show. But if you want to talk about scary movies, we have to go to the beginning of film. And the crazy part about film is ever since there's been film, there's been some scary movies. So it's been a genre since the beginning. But the 20s is where we really start seeing large-scale films and people going to see them. You're not paying a nickel and looking through a box at this point. You can actually go to a theater and watch a movie. So the correlations I kind of want to show you are how the guilt manifested in certain countries and certain parts of the world led to great literature and movies and scary shit because of what happened in this war, especially in Germany. So, people go to war, and at this time frame, plastic surgery now, I'm sure everyone has seen a disabled veteran who maybe has a prosthetic or someone who has been injured in a war and been healed or fixed with plastic surgery. And even today in 2019, there's great things that are done, but still it's not perfect. It's not perfect. So imagine 100 years ago what people looked like. So you had people rushing to go to war, and not many came back, and it just left countries battered. And if we're talking the start, if the start of something scary, where else can we really go than Nosferatu? There were a few other scary films, smaller, that were around that time frame, but Nosferatu is really the one that hit it out the park. And that's kind of where I want to go in here, because this whole episode isn't just strictly World War I, but this is kind of what kicked it off, because that's right when film started. I read a great book called The Wasteland, The Great War, and the origins of the horror movie. And to be honest with you, that was just a great read. And I never really put the connection together myself, even though it's right there in black and white. But after I was reading this book, it kind of all started to make sense. And if you guys get a chance to read it, it is a great, great, great read. It's by W. Scott Poole. And it was a quick read for me. It's there for the history fans and the horror fans, and I'm both. So it really tied in together. And to give a great example of some of the points that he was making, if you think of Germany in this war, Germany, they got their ass whooped, They got their ass whooped. They came out swinging, trying to flex, and they went home with their tails tucked. And a lot of guilt was manifested because of that. I mean, a lot of guilt, to the point where they were lying. So there were many orphaned children. There were many battered people that came home, and they tried to sweep that under the rug as quickly as possible. And even in their history books, the things they were teaching their kids, they didn't mention the despair that happened or how the war ended. They just kind of, brushed it up and everything was fine. And they put on this lie through propaganda and this whole facade, and people kind of believed it. But there was something awry, because the families that were home, the people that were home, they weren't right. And people started to put that shit together. And it's really even weirder. I was listening to another podcast kind of talk about you can kind of almost see how these people grew up to be Nazis. They were lied to as children about their own history, and then they had this strong influx of crazy ass horror movies, and through guilt and through pride and just through ignorance, you can kind of see how that leads to that. So it was kind of interesting to see how that all played out. But these people come back, and Germany is very upset, and then all of a sudden Nosferatu pops out in 1922. And it's kind of funny because the film starts off in late 1800s Germany in a town called Weisberg, which isn't a real town. But at the beginning, the movie, right at the beginning, it says, "Account of the great death that came to the fairy tale town." And the whole movie is a fucking metaphor for the war, for this dark, mysterious creature which came and plagued their country and sucked them dry of most of the lives. And most of these films were really just true forms of surrealism, and they were raw. It was the things these people saw in these wars were nothing to Nosferatu, but they started to get more used to seeing shit like that, and there was a dark cloud over the whole country. I mean, over all the countries in the world that participated in the war, but Germany especially. And you just see a strong, strong influx of horror movies come from Germany. And with Nosferatu, it was made by F.W. Murnau, and he had his own experiences with the war. He had lost people in the war. So it's no surprise to see that he made Nosferatu, and anytime he was interviewed for the movie and he talked about it, he always talked about the death that plagued over Germany. And so obviously it never really left him. So after the war, you start to see this, I don't know, just this guilt start manifesting through all these movies. And just to put it in perspective for you, what it was like in Germany. Germany lost 1.8 million people. So that was about 1,300 people a day in the war. So it was just, it wasn't right. And Germany, they kind of went to a republic state after the war. And that's where the propaganda came from, like the lies and the denial. And it... I don't know. It's a clear. If you could draw a line, I'm thinking of a police station where they hang up the pictures and they have the line in between it. You can literally draw the lines between the actions and of war to the movies. And then obviously Frankenstein was a tale written before the war had happened, but it's not a surprise that the adaptation became so popular and the movie became so popular after war. People had a yearning for something that they couldn't call for. So World War One, like we said, crazy as shit. There's a reason they call it the Great War. When you put all that in perspective, that's what started the powder keg. That was the big boom. That's what started the movies and cinema. And it's fucking, it's pretty sweet that if you go back to the beginning of movies, there's scary movies there. So I don't care what anybody says. They're not for kids. They're for everybody. And almost therapeutic, I guess, at that time frame for those people. But it even goes furthermore into the other wars. So if you go right into the next movie, to the next war, that one's not that hard to figure out. We dropped some radiation bombs on the country of Japan. It's not a coincidence that a movie about a giant lizard from radiation comes alive and destroys the city. So Godzilla, Hiroshima, They kind of tie together. I mean, these all start clicking a lot more once you start to think about it. It's kind of common sense, but I just always thought it was weird because I never really put the two together until I started thinking about them. You know, what was the motive behind these movies? What gave it that push? So you got big radiation bombs, boom, you got some Godzilla, and you know, it even transitions more to the '60s into the Vietnam War, because the Vietnam War was real crazy. Everybody says that was, you know, when once they put the war on the TV in people's houses, people were able to see what was going on, and you just shit. You're watching war on TV, man. That's like a real life scary movie. I love horror, but I don't want to watch that shit. I don't want to watch people in war, kids getting their limbs blown off. Now, if Jason's ripping somebody's foot off through a bear trap, I'd love to watch that. I would love to watch it, but I don't want to watch war on my TV. That's a little too morbid. But that's what they were doing. And it was kind of a strategy to get the war to stop, and actually some people will say that that worked, and that's why it did stop. But people are watching war on TV. Blood, blood. Then all of a sudden, in the distance, you can hear the chainsaw revving. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's not a coincidence. You know, it's just wild how it all plays. It plays together because the youth, the people who go to war, the young people, the teenagers, those are the people who give a shit. Those are the people that are protesting at your colleges. Those are the people that are going to fight your wars. So those are the people that are ramped up. So you're putting war on TV, and you're sparking something in a young Wes Craven, and a young John Carpenter, a young George A. Romero. Folks like that. I love it. You know, I love it. I hate that there was war, but I love that there was artwork because of it. I mean, it's true surrealism. Whether it's a Salvador Dali statue, because, you know, I didn't really tie into actual artwork, but it was the same for artwork as well. You had people like Salvador Dali popping up after the war because people had seen shit that they couldn't unsee, and they needed something to kind of scratch that itch with. So when you had the Vietnam War going on, you had a slew of great directors and people who just wanted to keep horror alive. They didn't have money. They didn't have anybody that wanted to give them money, but they found ways to make it work. And obviously the movies that we grew up with and we love. But people kind of got addicted to seeing a certain something. And some people watched Vietnam and couldn't unsee it. So that's why you see these certain genres, these Last House on the Lefts, these Texas Chainsaw Massacres, the splatter porn, torture porn, excuse me, as they would say. Just real sadistic shit, which I love. You see that as an expression of what the country was going through. And it just leads even furthermore. I mean, even if you look at something like a 9/11, well, people were really worried about a global attack, a global terror. So it's not a fucking phenomenon that zombies became the it thing. This generation's it thing. It all ties and weaves in together. And I don't know, I just think it's very interesting to think how something so fucked up and so horrible could make something so good. Now, if you think what's even weirder is the special effects that go into it. So horror special effects legend Tom Savini, he was a medic in Vietnam. And he said his whole purpose was to make shit look realistic like it did when he was in battle. I mean, that's some pretty fucked up motives. It would be a dream of mine if I can go into a time machine to be on, a production team for an old horror movie like that. But I can imagine just a bunch of guys, circa 1981, all hanging out, getting high, drinking, and they're thinking, how in the fuck do I make this look real? How do I make it look like this guy's eyeball popped out? How do I make it look like this guy's brain is just bashed out? What looks like real blood? What's going to trickle under this doorway to make people think that's actually blood? Well, who would be a better person to get than a Vietnam medic? Well, Tom Savini's not the only one. I wish I could say, oh, he's the only person that's been like this, but it's not that way. This is all throughout the whole genre. It's people who have been afflicted or been hurt by war, and these are the people who are putting these pictures together. I mean, it's really, really wild. I was, when I kind of started this podcast, I thought, I want to touch bases with all things horror. And I was like, man, I just had a whole list full of episodes, and I was almost trying to get right down to the base of it. And I was like, where do you start with horror? And monsters popped up. Monsters and the origins of monsters. And that kind of took me to monster movies and the origin of the horror film itself. And I was just flooding myself with information. I mean, it was neat to see because it wasn't just random. These weren't just random. It was a domino effect. What was going on in the world was what was going on cinema. And I don't know if people think about it in the moment. I don't know if people or put the correlation with these certain films and the reasons they come out. I don't know if people are watching Frankenstein and saying, damn, World War I was a son of a bitch. I don't know. I don't know if people are watching Jason Voorhees slashing people up saying, man, we shouldn't have sent them boys to Nam. But it's all metaphorically what it's saying. It all ties in together. So we are in this day and age, because horror has many subgenres, there's no one type. So we're in a day and age where we can see all of them progress. So from the different wars, I think that they've kind of split off and made subgenres, kind of how I was saying, like with the 9/11 and zombies. And I was actually listening to a really cool a professor, Stephen T. Asma, talk about monsterology, and he was really going in depth and kind of almost what we're talking about with the fears of where people get their fear of monsters. And he touched briefly on film and how he was saying the global terrorism. And that's where we're at right now. So a movie like 300 or a large attack of people attacking us or infiltrating us, that would be a movie that would really excel because it's a fear of ours. And a real xenophobia kind of thing. Even the movies like a Hostel, something to that nature, being afraid in a foreign territory. It's just fearful. And I'm myself a true fan of the slasher flick, so I'm not wanting I'm not wanting war on our TV sets, but I don't know, maybe if we can get some horror movies with people on meat hooks again, that'd be nice. That would be nice. So if we can find a way without sending people to war to do that, that would be awesome. But man, it's so weird. It's the domino effect that I talk about. And in literature with books, because I'm not going to go as deep in with books on this episode per se. We might get into a little Lovecraft or, we may get into conversations about that. But it's the movies that are really striking. And it's easy to follow because movies, they feel like it's a tale as old as time, but it's really not that old. They're not that old, especially movies that you can look up, because the first start of film, it's people clipping together short clips and you could see it in a weird viewing booth. But actual films, it's very cool to see the war and the way that it fucked everybody up, and the way that they expressed it. I guess some people might have made some, romance style movies about it. But in my eyes, there's only one true way to face things, and that's head on. And I think that's what a lot of these people did. And I think these movies were just a big middle finger to whoever was denying the war, whoever didn't go through it. Because like I said, it was young people. And it's young people who make the best art. They have the most oomph going on. So, I don't know if from the beginning that Gavrilo Princip knew that this was what was going to happen. Obviously he didn't. He didn't even know the war was going to start. But man, wouldn't it be fucking cool to be a guy in that sandwich shop, like on some Doc Brown shit, and just be like, hey, yo, bro, let me talk to you real quick. You're about to cause Freddy Krueger. You'd be like, what? You would have no idea what you're talking about. But in between your Reubens, bites of your Reuben and your pickle, man, I was actually listening to a podcast, Dan Carlin's podcast, and he was talking about him, and he was just saying how unimportant this guy is, but how important he is. And he was stating because of the war. Now, the war is the cause for the horror movies, so that's the product that I love. And I tied the bond even further. And man, it's just wild to all play it out. So next time you guys look at a horror movie, I want you to guys try to look for the motive. What the hell is the motive? Where's the fear behind it? And who's the person who made it? Because you might not find it scary. I mean, I'm afraid of the movie The Birds. That's because I'm afraid of birds. But you could think it's silly. You could think it is not a scary movie, but if you're afraid of clowns, I guarantee it's not on your top watch list. So next time I want you to look inside of the character, or look inside of whatever's going on and say, what's the fear here? What's the motive? And what's this being sparked by currently? Or even, like I said, because it all spider-webbed out from our past. So try to find the roots of it all. And that's what I'm doing now when I watch a horror movie. I really, really try to think, man, what directions he's going. And it's not that hard for somebody. Now, I don't have a disgust for Jordan Peele. I do not, but I don't know if I could rank him a horror director yet. But even his films, as an example, like his Get Out films, and obviously playing on a racially tense time in America. So that one's not hard to put together. But if you can go back further, if you see trailers coming out for things coming out, just look. Just say, what's behind this? Why are people afraid of this? Where does this fear come from? So, I hope I gave you a little deeper look. On these shows, I don't want to run them too long because I'm not trying to put people to sleep. But I'm just trying to make your brain think. I'm trying to put you in a different way of thinking when it comes to scary movies. So if you're looking at the Wolfman, if you're looking at Freddy Krueger, if you're looking at Leatherface, say, where the hell did you come from? And what the hell's going on with you? So, I don't mean to insult Edwin Starr and his great song War, but he sang it wrong, because it's definitely good for monsters. So next time you hear it, War, what is it good for? Monsters. Say it again.